Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm going to talk to you about the first 5 varieties that I personally recommend that you should start growing first. So number 1, first plant you should grow is going to be a Voodoo Child or a Sugar Dragon. You can see why we have, in this case, this is Arizona Purple, but it's very much similar to the ones I talked about. It's already got a flower bud, and it's early to bloom. So this Arizona Purple, or here's Sugar Dragon, it has some flower buds that turn to branches. But generally, this is the first plant I recommend. 1, because it's gonna be self-fertile. 2, it's an early bloomer, so it's gonna be an excellent pollen source. 3, it's not hard to get. You can find yourself a Sugar Dragon or a Voodoo Child pretty easily online, and you won't get duped too easily. You can see what the plants look like. They're generally gonna have 1 to 3 thorns, really thick thorn. They're dark olive green, 3-sided, has nice ribs or waves, and it's generally gonna look very similar to this. So the reason why I suggest growing this first, a Sugar Dragon especially, or a Voodoo Child, is because it's a little bit slower to grow at first. It takes kind of another season to mature and produce fruit. So absolutely number 1 variety, in my humble opinion, would be 8S, which is Sugar Dragon, Voodoo Child, Arizona Purple, or even Neon. That one's similar as well, but I notice it does bloom a little later. So that's the absolute number 1 variety I recommend. So in short, Sugar Dragon. Okay, this is the second variety I recommend growing, and it's actually my favorite to eat, which is American Beauty or something similar. This is a Hylocereus guatemalensis, and they tend to be self-fertile and a purple-fleshed fruit. Absolutely delicious. Now in this case, this American Beauty, you can see it has lots of growth, no flower buds, but similar fruit or similar varieties that will taste the same are going to be something like, here's G2. You can see another early bloomer. And in fact, some farms considered G2 and American Beauty to be the same. They even sold them as the same. So there's also, here's another G2 with some nice flower buds, as you can see. And this is actually very similar. I believe it's related to American Beauty, is G1, G2, G3. So my G1 is over here, no flower buds yet. G2. And here's G3, which was actually Leo Manuel's favorite Guatemalan. And again, these are all gonna taste really similar to American Beauty. They're gonna be self-fertile, and as you can see, they're early bloomers. So absolutely important variety. American Beauty's easiest to find, but in my opinion, a lot of people just sell these mixed up, G2, G3 as American Beauty, because they look identical. You can't tell the difference in the flowers really, or the fruit, in my experience. Now,
some of the largest fruit too. They're huge.
Oh, really? A huge fruit, delicious, and generally self-fertile as well. Now, there's one that's a little different that I really like, and that's down here, and that's Condor. I actually have a couple Condors, and this one I got from Elk Creek. And you can see it's not a very old plant, but look at all the flower buds. And Condor, according to Oceanside Dragon Fruit, they said that the smell of the fruit is different than American Beauty, and the taste, this was actually Leonardo's favorite, if I recall. He liked Condor a lot. So you can see, in general, a Guatemalan is a really important variety, or second that you want to grow. I suggest American Beauty or G2 or something similar like Condor or a G3. So that's what I recommend. I do have a really rare one, a Rixford. It's over here. And in this case, most people actually have mislabeled Rixford, and the real Rixford is actually really hard to grow. This was Leo Manuel's here. And you can see that this one has had a lot of damage from the cold. It's really susceptible to the cold damage. It actually lost the core here. And something I just started to notice is this Rixford actually has so many 4 spines. And generally Guatemalans have a single spine, but this Rixford has not just 1, 2, or 3, it has 4 spines. So this one can be sensitive, that's one drawback. But again, there's different cultivars. American Beauty generally is the easiest to grow, and it does pretty well. So that's number 2, in my opinion. Let's move on to number 3. Okay, and the third variety I recommend growing is a pink-fleshed fruit. This is my first choice, which would be 3S, which is Paul Thompson's Delight. It's a really light pink fruit. It's delicious, but you can see that there's no flower buds. One, this plant's not that big, but it tends to bloom a little later. So there's different varieties of pink-fleshed fruit. Townsend Pink's another one that's really people enjoy and it tastes really good. And my favorites are actually over here. It's a Laverne Pink. And be aware of Laverne pink because not all Laverne pinks are the same. I call this one Paul's Laverne pink because it actually was a mislabeled Laverne red. And this produces a really sweet light pink fruit. It Brixes in the mid-20s, absolutely sweet, delicious, really delicious grapefruit. But you can see that these ones generally wake up and flower a little bit later. So not much activity, there's some new growth, but I never get flower buds on this until after the solstice. So a third choice is, I humbly really recommend, is a really delicious pink fleshed fruit. All right, let's talk about the number 4 variety that you should grow. Okay, so the 4th variety I recommend is a purple flowered fruit. So this plant here is Bruni, and that's probably my favorite of the 3 sisters, Bruni, Kathy Von Arum, and Connie Meyer. And the reason why I like Bruni is it tends to bloom first, and it has a delicious coconut flavored fruit. Smaller size, but the most gorgeous flower. You can see the flower here. So this is Bruni. The flower is purple, absolutely gorgeous. Now another gorgeous flower that tastes probably even better in my opinion is Axe. So here is one of my Axe plants, and again this has a very similar purple flower, but you can see the fruit is actually magenta inside. So very different flavored fruit. This one is really sweet and I like it a lot. So that's Axe. So the 4th variety you should grow is a unique flower. In this case I recommend one of the purple flowers. There's quite a few out there now. And number 5, I recommend something rare. So there's so many out there. They can be so expensive, it's ridiculous, but there are some really unique cultivars, and here's 2 right here. So this one, you can see Cotton Candy actually has a flower bud right here, and this is 1-10, one of Don Burnett's seedlings, and this one makes a white flower where its sisters make a purple flower, but this is a really delicious, really sweet fruit. So people really recommend and enjoy Cotton Candy. You can see it has a lot of growth. It got a little damaged over the winter, but this is a unique variety that definitely is going to taste delicious, and I'm really excited to grow, and you can see it's doing well so far. Here's another really rare, unique one. This is Esmeralda. This is a white-fleshed undatus, but it's got a green skin. And you can see, look at how unique the growth is. It's really beautiful. It's red. So I would tend to not be stuck on the names as much, as those first 4 I recommended are absolutely essential in my humble opinion. But once you start getting beyond those, there's so many others. There's red flesh varieties that are good. But I would recommend, if you're only growing 5, do the 4 and then something really unique. And they can get expensive, so be careful. But just make sure that you pick something that people have really reported tasting great. Like Connie G could be another one. There's just so many out there. So those are my recommendations of the top 5 that you might want to start with if you're getting into the dragon fruit obsession. Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm going to talk about another easy potting soil solution for dragon fruit. And this is Sunshine Fit Mix number 4. Now it has mycorrhizae and extra perlite. So it's basically pumice, perlite, and a wetting agent. Now, one of our viewers, Stefan Marshall, recommended this, and he's been having great success. So I've been using this season just to root my dragon fruit, and it's been working great so far. We'll show you those results at the end of this video. Now, first I want to show you what it looks like dry, and it does not need to be pre-wetted. So again, mainly just pumice, or perlite, and peat moss. Now wet, looks like this, and it's got good porosity. It's porous, but it's fast draining and it retains moisture. So during the warm season this time of year, this is a great material to root dragon fruit. Now, if you want to upgrade it, I'd recommend what Stefan Marshall uses, and he uses this to grow his dragon fruit in pots, and he uses 70 to 80% sunshine number 4 and 20 to 30 pumice. So in just 2 ingredients here, one ingredient being this, which I think is a little moist for maybe the winter, but mixing just a bag of this and pumice is having some great results for us so far. So you can see these 2 ingredients here, and then if you wanted to add a third one, you could add sand. So maybe an optimal one I'm just starting to play with now is 60% sunshine, 20% sand, 20% pumice. And I think that would just be perfect for dragon fruit. And this would probably be an easier and cheaper potting soil solution for maybe one of these 20-gallon dragon fruit pots. So I'm gonna make that mixture and try it in a few of these pots on my next trellises. We'll see how it goes, especially in a long term. But in the short term, this is working great. So let's go up to the greenhouse and I'll show you the results so far. Okay, so here's not a greenhouse, this is my hothouse. And you can see I have some young and mature cuttings in here, but the results have been awesome. Just a week or two ago, I planted one of Leo Manuel's hybrids and it's totally rooted. This is unbelievable. Same with this one. And here's one I just did a few days ago, a big axe cutting. And it has not rooted yet, but the good news is look, you can see this is the experiment where I'm using it just straight out of the bag, 100% of the Sunshine Mix number 4. And I would recommend probably adding that pumice because it seems a little bit like it's retaining a little bit too much moisture. So again, that difference of adding that pumice like Stefan Miller recommended, I think it makes all the difference.
Marshall.
Thank you, sir. Stefan Marshall. Sorry about that, sir. So also another thing I've learned is that dragon fruit really like a wet and to a dry cycle. That cycle where the potting soil gets wet and dries out quickly, that's another way to get faster roots with these plants. And I think that's another huge benefit of using pumice and Sunshine Mix number 4. Also, it's really lightweight. Feel this, Scott.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah, that is lightweight.
Yep. So they're really lightweight, that sand will weigh it down. So again, having excellent results. You can see, I don't see a single plant with rot in here. So 100% success so far, 0 rot. And thank you, Stefan Marshall, for recommending that product. It's easy to find, it's at all my local big box stores, and it's great to use. Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm going to share my results on a 2.5-month experiment where I used 4 different growing medias to root dragon fruit cuttings. Now, I can tell you right off the bat that Perlite number 4 was the least effective. You can see the plants aren't as healthy, and when I pull them, I'll show you why. This is straight pumice, pretty good results it's looking like. I'm interested to see how developed the roots are. This is pure sand. Those 1-gallon pots are pretty heavy, but they're really healthy looking. And then these ones here are the new mix where I'm using Sunshine Mix number 4 mixed with pumice at a ratio about 40% pumice and 60% of the Sunshine Mix. And so I have 6 pots there, and then I wanted to compare to see how it did against my mix, which is, let's see, perlite, pumice, biochar, chunky coconut core, peat moss, sand. So let me pull these out of the pots and let's see which type of media resulted in the best root zone. So it looks like a hot mess, but we have some good data to analyze, so check this out. Perlite number 4 is not the best media. This Jade Red did a little better, had a root all the way down to the bottom of the pot, but I think you'd have to water perlite more to have it be better. I'm not going to use that in the future. Pumice did better than perlite, you could see especially on this Trisha hybrid, and even better was pure sand. So sand had really well developed roots. So if you want to do it cheap, pure sand, not a problem. It worked really well for us. Look at how developed these roots are. Now the best one I think was Sunshine Mix number 4 and pumice, as you could see. So these Esmeralda cuttings basically filled up the whole 1-gallon pot in 2.5 months rooting. And I think the reason why is because there's mycorrhizal fungi, and this product seems to cycle from wet to dry faster. And that's how you're going to get your cuttings to root faster, in my opinion. Here's some more. This one I ripped, so the roots are more advanced in it. So generally all of these ones with the Sunshine Mix pot, they had really nice developed roots, especially the Trisha hybrid of mine. And then my mix, which is more expensive, it's about the same. So I think peat moss is a good thing. I think the best and easiest, cheapest mix to root your dragon fruit are going to be using Sunshine Mix number 4 and pumice, which we did a video on. So all I did was use 40% that, and then, 60% Sunshine Mix number 4 and 40% pumice. And those 2 ingredients had some great results here, as you can see. Now I do dip all of my cuttings in Vermister's Vitality, which I believe helps as well. So those are my results. I hope you get something out of it. And in the future, I'm going to stick to my mix, but I'm actually going to mainly just use this because it's cheaper to just do that at 60% and pumice at 40. And I think that's how I'm going to root all my dragons. Hey, this is Paul, and I've been getting a lot of questions about people wondering why their dragon fruit doesn't have any fruit yet. And the short answer is probably the season, and number one factor is the age of your plant. So you can see here that this voodoo child is about 4 years old now, and you can see that it had these branches at least one season where they've been dormant, and now that they've turned to fruiting wood, as Danny would call it, our friend Danny Loftus, he would call these fruiting wood branches. So the first season branches, like this new growth here, it's never going to have a fruit. It very rarely, actually, it could produce a fruit at the end of the branch, but that's very uncommon. Usually the branches will grow, and then they need a season to mature, and then they're going to make these flower buds. So if you look around here, all of these have had the same fertilizer, yet this is a variety that has all the flower buds here. And the reason why is because Sugar Dragon and Voodoo Child tend to be the early bloomers along with American Beauty. So this is its second flush. You can actually see its first flush is right here. So it's on its second wave of flower buds already, and these will produce anywhere up to 6 flushes in one season for this variety of Voodoo Child and Sugar Dragon. So that's a mature plant in an optimal situation. You can see here's a little bit of a younger one. This is a Sugar Dragon, and it has a lot more young growth here that will not produce flower buds, but it's just starting to produce some flower buds here with some new growth. So you can prune off some of your new branches. If you have a huge plethora amount, you could prune them off, and that may inspire these plants to flower. But another factor is also the time of the year. So the summer solstice is coming, and that's where this one, Mr. Wu in this case, you can see Mr. Wu is really happy, well fertilized, lots of flower buds that turn to branches here. You can see like this one. And this one, it wants to produce flower buds, but the temperature is the biggest factor, in my opinion, for this plant. So once we get a nice heat wave, this thing's gonna produce a ton of flower buds here. It's ready to go. It's got this mature growth here. And last season, this produced around 2 dozen fruit off of this plant alone. It was highly productive. So I expect a lot of fruit from this plant this season. But again, it's the time of the year. After the summer solstice in June 16th, that's where I predict that this one will have a lot more of its flower buds. Also a heat wave. We're waiting for that heat wave next week. We'll get into the 80s. So you can see here, this is Donovan's Laverne Red. And this one produced quite a few fruits. One was almost 3 pounds last season, and it's got lots of early young growth here, really happy and healthy, but no flower buds yet. And again, I think this is due to the time of the year and the temperature. So you can see it's been foggy, it rained last night, it's in the 60s, it's just really cold, and these plants are just waking up here, waiting for some more heat. In this case, you can see this one's just topping the trellis. So generally, you want to promote a lot of the energy to go up and over the trellis. So I'm going to have to thin out all these branches here and promote growth up and over the trellis. That's another way to get more of your dragon fruit to produce flower buds. The branches need to come over and bend down. So something like this one, this would be a good chance that this could produce a fruit this season. It hasn't yet. We're gonna wait for that heat wave. It's got some new growth here, but I would predict that a branch like this, it's over a year old, it could produce a fruit, and it's generally gonna do it down towards the bottom, or maybe here on this gray Panama. So that's where we generally see a lot of their flower buds. So once it warms up here, like this plant, for example, this one has never flower budded yet. It's an unknown white flesh from Mexico. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna thin out some of the new growth, and then especially down here, you'll wanna see like this one, for example. You don't want these branches to grow down. So what you'll wanna do is just thin them out. And this is another way to help promote the plant, to wanna entice it to bloom.
Or cutting off the tip, right?
Yeah, you could tip it, but some people say that that doesn't matter. So I like to tip my branches. I think it does, in my humble opinion, I think it's a good thing to promote it depending on the time of the year. But some people swear that tipping it doesn't matter at all. So generally, as long as you see happy, healthy growth like this, I'm not concerned. I know that this plant is going to produce flowers and fruit this season. The problem is I just need the weather to cooperate, and that's out of my control. The soil is well draining. You can see it's happy, it's healthy, has lots of new growth, it's well fertilized. So everything I've done on my end that I can do to get this plant healthy and happy has been done. Now I'm just waiting on the weather. And that tends to be the biggest factor. So your zone where you are, like in Puerto Rico, they can grow much longer. Their season's much longer than here in Southern California, because where we're gonna grow is maybe July till September. So our window is narrower, where these plants are gonna produce and grow under the optimal conditions. And this season especially has been so cold. I mean, you can look at this one. This polyrhizis, this Trinidad, is actually, I may pull it from the collection just because it hasn't produced yet for me, and I've had it since 2020. So this plant's 3 years old, and every year it gets damaged and I have to cut off the canopy. Like, I don't see any of this bouncing back. I don't see any new growth. It's really floppy and it's not healthy. So what the plant's gonna do is gonna produce new branches down low. And so something like this, it's really hard to entice, and it's actually frustrating. I've wanted to try this fruit for several years. Scott, you got to try it, right?
I think it was happier once I moved it to almost like full shade.
So this one, in this case, you think maybe the sunlight could be a factor.
Yeah,
maybe this is getting too much sun.
Yeah, mine didn't flower and fruit until I moved it under a tree, which it's
so you protected it more and it's doing better.
It likes it more, yeah.
Well, as you can see, there's just so many factors. Some you can control, some you can't. But the number one way that you can get a dragon fruit to fruit and flower, in my opinion, is one, the age of the plant. You got to have these nice mature branches, like something like this is going to produce a fruit. And you got to make sure it's the time of year is right and the temperature. The more I work with these plants, the more I realize that temperature is the biggest factor for these plants to want to flower and grow. So days like today where it's in the 60s, there's not going to be any new flower buds. We need that next heat wave. So once we get into the mid 70s, 80s, we're going to have some more flower buds in here. So I hope that helps a little bit, and some of the strategies that we use and we have learned over the years to promote flowers and fruit on these beautiful, lovely plants. Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm going to talk about how I thin my branches. As you can see here, this is a no ID, similar to American Beauty. I call it Del Riego. 0 flower buds, but epic growth. It must have at least over 100 new branches in different states. So in a case like this, I'm going to use different strategies to thin out the branches here. But before we thin out this beast, let me go show you a younger plant and how I thin and use a different strategy for that plant. Okay, so what I want to do for this plant, I want to promote it to grow up and over the trellis as fast as possible. So first I have to clean my pruning shears. I use rubbing alcohol. And then I start at the bottom here, and I want to remove any growth that's at the base. So you can see these little branches forming. So I pull them off, and I go up and I'll just pluck these off. And this is a hybrid of mine. This is a Asunta 2 seedling. And so what I want to do is, I don't need this many branches. So I'm going to thin them out. So all the energy can be channeled to these 3 up here. So that's what I'm going to do for this plant in this case. And again, just 3 branches, just like that. And so I'll monitor them. Also, I made sure that the tips are there intact, so they're going to grow to be nice, healthy branches. Now, I actually have 2 hybrids in here. Here's another one that is different. This is a Maria Fucsia seedling. So again, since it's a different plant, I'm going to clean my shears, and I'm going to prune these 2 off. Because this little cutting, I want it just to promote its growth up this one branch here, this nice soft branch that was the most developed of the 3. And so you just want to tie it up. Now what you have to do is be really careful when you're tying these young branches. They will rip easily. You gotta be really careful. You don't want to tie them too tight right away. But they are rather flexible, so they're forgiving. But don't rip them if you can avoid it. So something like that. And then in a couple weeks, I'll tie it up again. So that's what I do with these branches and these younger cuttings or younger plants. You want to get them up and over the trellis as fast as possible. That's your goal, one stem. So now that we've done that on a younger one, let's go show you how to tame a beast, that 4-year-old plant. Let's go do it. Okay, so now I need to tame this beast. So again, I like to sanitize my tools. I don't want to cross-contaminate different plants. So I don't care about the same plant, but different plants. I try to not cross-contaminate. So in this case, I got to think about airflow and weight and so many other factors. So right off the bat, anything that's kind of 3 in a row, I like to prune them off to give them some more space to improve that airflow. So I like to usually go in between every other odd one. I'm also going to look for any that have damaged tips because I want the branches to be really nice and straight. In this case, I don't see really any damaged tips, although something like this is just too much here. There's this one vertical, and then there's like 4 or 5 here. And that's just way too many. This is a spot where pests could hide. You don't want spots where the leaf-footed bugs can be, because those are really detrimental to dragon fruit plants. Now, branches that are just kind of going straight up into nowhere that are going to break off in time, I want to get rid of those and promote growth to more spread out. And again, airflow, sunlight, those are things I'm thinking about, as well as weight distribution. So you can see where I am right here. I want to entice more branches to grow on this part of the trellis. You can see it's wide open here versus most of the plant is going this way. So I've moved some of the branches, and I'm now gonna, in this season, I want to train the branches to grow this direction. So things that are growing in that direction, I'm gonna kind of thin out, and that's my strategy for this plant this season here. So some of these I also want to just prune off completely. You can break them off too if they're younger, but it tends to work better if you use your pruning shears. But on this branch, I'm going to cut them all off because I'd love to get a fruit somewhere here off one of these other nodes. So also, if I keep growing a branch out here, it's going to stretch out and it's going to break in time. So this branch is about as long as I want, and like this one is about as long as I want hanging down off the trellis. So in this case, these branches, I'm going to prune them off, and I'll prune off this whole row. So what I'm going to do is probably remove about 70 to 80% of these branches off to really promote that nice spread out canopy, improve airflow, and also promote it to flower, make some flower buds and some fruit this season. So let me get cutting. I'm going to get to work, and I'm going to prune this off, and I'll show you what it's like when I'm done. Okay, so these are going to go in the compost pile. You can see I have tons of fresh, young cuttings that I do not want. So, as you can see here, it looks like I've pruned them out. There's a few more that I probably could have pulled out and pruned off if I wanted to. But generally, I cut out majority of them, and I think with a little bit of heat that this plant's going to react with some flower buds. Now, you can see here's a younger branch here that I broke off the tip. So what I did here, and I'll show you quickly right here, Scott, can you see that? So if this was a cutting that I wanted to keep, what I like to do is I get it to the perfect length that I want, and then what I do is I just break off the tip like that. So I did that about a month ago on this one, you can see here. So I just broke off the tip, and what happens is the cutting just starts to mature. And so in this case, I want to take this cutting and root it. So it's a little on the young side, but this one is definitely going to root, and it's going to do fine. So there it is, a nice young healthy cutting that I can now root. And I could repeat that if I wanted to on some more of these rather than prune them off like I did. But that's what I like to do. So I'll thin out the branches just like so on a plant this size, and maybe keep a few younger branches to share with friends or to propagate. And I expect that this is going to have a nice flush this season of flower buds as soon as we get our heat wave or around the summer solstice. Hey, this is Paul and Scott, and today we're going to talk about how we have our hundreds of dragon fruit varieties survive during the cold weather in Southern California. So here's 10 tips about what I recommend for dragon fruit to survive and do well and thrive in colder weather. So number one, it starts with your soil. So soil health. And you can see here, this is a compost-free potting soil. And I've interviewed quite a few farmers, or Scott and I both have, and we've learned over the years that compost-free potting soil has better results with dragon fruit, especially using sand and peat moss. So these are probably my most primary ingredients that I recommend is sand, number one. This all-purpose sand, I get it at Home Depot. And just make sure it says it's safe for potting soil. And then number two is, this is a really easy mix. This is Sunshine Mix number 4. It's similar to peat moss. I mean, the main ingredient is peat moss, but it has mycorrhizae, wetting agents, perlite as well. So stick to these types of products. They're gonna have a long-lasting potting soil, much better results than using something like this. After about 3 seasons, this is about over half of its compost, ground up trees. So I started using things like this, but over the years, even amending it, it gave us problems. So switching to these and having healthy soil, I mean, look, we have some beautiful winter fruit here. This is Sayarong's Orange Dragon, a really sensitive Megalanthus hybrid. And this fruit's been on here since October. So over 3 months, it's slowly ripening and the plant is overall healthy. This one does get a bit of rust, which is expected in our colder weather. But I mean, look, it's got beautiful new growth right here and nice dark green branches, even in the cold weather. So these plants think it's spring still. It's been a rather mild winter so far, although you wouldn't believe that these plants were in the 20s about a week ago, 6 days ago. So we got down to 29 degrees and then we had 3 frost episodes this week, and you can see these plants are just fine. So that's the number one tip, is having healthy compost-free potting soil. And one of the farms, I think their quote was that they don't consider themselves dragon fruit farmers, they consider themselves soil farmers. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. Okay, the second tip, most important, is the timing of your fertilizer. So this is actually the award-winning American Beauty here. This is the plant that, if you've hopefully seen our video where we sent Weird Explorer a bunch of fruit, this plant produced the winning fruit, the American Beauty. And what I did is I timed the fertilizer and I fertilize it with a nitrogen-rich fertilizer. You can actually just top dress with Fox Farms, but I used blood meal. And I timed that in the early to mid-fall. And then I top dress it heavily and I fertilize it, and I also use Grow Power Plus. And you can see there's a little bit of rust, but overall, healthy plants, really old plants as you can see here. And I time that fertilizer just right. What you don't want to do is use an all-purpose fertilizer in the middle of winter. You actually want to fertilize these plants and have them recover during that fall to winter transition. And some of the best products we recommend, and I actually use Grow Power Plus. I used it on this mango tree. You can see how healthy it is. It's actually got growth right after this frost. So
how big was that when you got it?
This one is actually Leo seedling, and it was about here when I planted it.
That's only been like, what, a year?
It's been in the soil here for about 6 months, 5 months.
Oh, not even that.
And it's just doing really great. It's thriving. And I really believe that the main reason why is thanks to Dan, Scott's father-in-law, is this Grow Power Plus. And I know that the owners tragically passed away unexpectedly, and now you can't find it. I mean, it's in stores, but they're not producing it anymore. I do hear that they're going to produce something very similar in the future, but regardless, I've asked a lot of people that know a lot more than me about ingredients and fertilizers, and they all come back to 2 things. They first think it's the humic acid, which you can buy granular humic acids for a fair price. It's pretty cheap. So they truly believe the key ingredients to this product that we can make our own is going to be using humic acid, and then the soil penetrant, which we already know is gypsum.
So you don't have any updates on what's going on with the Grow Power business?
No, I know that people are still finding it in stores, and last I heard from my local supplier is they know a lot more than me, and they discovered that supposedly they're going to make the same type of product but without the soil penetrant, which would be without the gypsum.
Okay.
So that's where we're at, tragically, but I did buy a surplus. I have a whole nother season's worth of this product, and I truly believe that this has been the game changer. I mean, hopefully you've seen our other video where we talked about this and talked to Dan, And I'm proud to say a year later, my plants will look a lot healthier, just like Dan's. I mean, Scott, did you use any Grow Power on your plants?
Yeah, I put Grow Power on
at your
this.
house?
Yeah, yeah.
And did you notice a darker green, healthier?
I think they look better, definitely.
They do look better? I
mean, I don't know. I haven't talked to Dan about what he's going to do about a replacement, but I'm sure he's thinking about it too. So we'll have to ask him, but maybe he has some updates on Grow Power or whatever he's going to substitute for that.
Yeah, so I have a season to figure it out, but I really truly believe again that using humic acids, gypsum, which I don't have here right now, and worm castings would probably be really close as a second.
You might have to end up making your own. That's
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah. So regardless, the timing of your fertilizer, I used quite a bit of this, and you can see it's a nitrogen-rich fertilizer. So the NPK here, that's key, is having a high nitrogen value, 5, and then P, which is going to be potassium, and phosphorus, right? So you could almost have like a blood meal would be just a first number would be high in nitrogen. So blood meal or this would work really well. Again, time it right in the fall. I don't recommend, I'm not fertilizing any of my plants in the dead of winter, and I'm not going to fertilize them again until the spring. So probably about April is when they'll get fertilized next. So timing and the quality of your fertilizer components are going to result in really healthy dragon fruit, as you can see. All right, tip number 3, and that is know your microclimate. I'm in zone 9B, and this part of our yard is the warmest part of the yard. You can see I have a blue Java banana. We have the Princess of the Night with the fruit here. We have the Lost Dutchman with the fruit here as well, still in the dead of winter. Bit of rust there, as you can see, but we'll talk about that later. And then you can see I have some other really strange epiphyllums and epiphytes and things that I don't even know what some of them are, but they're very sensitive and they're really, really healthy here. And if you believe it or not, it's been 29 degrees to 116 degrees on our property here in the past few years during growing our dragon fruit here. So they've tolerated that huge range. But again, some of these varieties would die in a different part of the yard. This microclimate, what's so special about it is you can see I have a Hoang Red here as well, one of our Asunta seedlings, a Frankie's Red hybrid crossed with Asunta, given to me by my friend Richard Renshaw, and then this really old Frankie's Red, which is really, really old. It's even got new growth, but this is actually the warmest part of our yard. And the reason why is this little microclimate is about 6 degrees warmer because all the cold air slowly sinks down the hill. So every night as it gets really cold, slowly this air moves. And so this perfect spot, this is the perfect spot where I put all of my most sensitive plants here. And you can see I have even some rare other plants here, and they're all thriving. Here's some of our really sensitive ones like Trinidad and Red Leonardo that can't take so much sun. And so again, this is just the perfect spot. And so I can get by about 5 to 7 degrees in just this spot alone of warmer weather. So know your microclimate and know your zone. All right, let's move on to tip number 4. It's going to be about knowing the age of your plant. As you can see here, this Frankie's Red is really, really old. I believe it's almost, I think, 18 years old, 17 years old. Came in 2006. So really old Frankie's Red. And you can see it's doing fine out here, but let's go see what we do with our really young cuttings. Let's go check it out. Okay, tip number 4, the biggest factor, the age of your plant. So look at this Connie G 1-2. You can see it's a young cutting. I've been trying to root it here in our greenhouse during the winter. No luck, but if I left this outside, it probably would die. So unrooted cuttings, you absolutely need to bring them inside and protect them. This is an unheated greenhouse. We'll get from 40 to 100 degrees in here. Yesterday I came in here, it was 95 degrees. So I also recommend unrooted cuttings to keep them safe and protected from the frost, and then anything that you just transplanted. This is Gray Martin's 1355. I rooted it and I just transplanted it out of a 1 gallon, so I brought it in here to keep it safe because honestly you don't really want to transplant dragon fruit during the winter season in Southern California, especially if they're dormant. If you are going to choose to do it like I do, I don't recommend doing it, is be really careful. Just repot it without damaging any of the roots and you can get away with it. You can see on this side I'm actually having some problems with too much sun, so I put up some extra burlap here, and you can see I'm also protecting all of my seedlings. Now I'll put these outside later to evaluate them, but the first 2 years of growing my seedlings I like to protect them inside the greenhouse during the winter. So I have some that are a year older and I left them out on purpose to see how they react to the cold. So age of your cutting, and you can see we have lots of different other plants here, really matters. I even had to bring in my variegated pepper here. It's not dragon fruit, but it's really cool looking because I knew something like this would die in the frost. So age of your plants, really mature plants, you can leave them outside and they're a lot more cold tolerant than something that's really young or that's just starting to root. Okay, tip number 5 is trellis design. There are so many ways that you can trellis a dragon fruit to support it. Hopefully you've seen how we do it. I like to stuff a concrete and use rebars and make a really stout trellis that's into the ground. And I don't ever have to think about it. We had some strong winds and you could see these hybrids here, this Trisha seedling I grew and a physical graffiti seedling I'm growing out to evaluate. You can see the branches, I haven't really pruned them and they're fine. I mean, there's even new growth here. So during our cold weather, you can see these plants are really happy and healthy, but this trellis is designed such that I have really good drainage. In fact, I've drilled extra holes in all these pots so the drainage comes out. And then again, I'm using a compost-free potting soil. So you can see a stout trellis like this really matters, especially if I need to cover it with a blanket or something, a frost blanket or something like that, which is another tip I'll show you soon. Versus maybe a trellis if you have a design like this along a fence. Well, this is another good design, but again, how you set it up. This one's not as stout, I would say. And you can see a branch like this in a strong wind might break. So really how you set up your dragons, I definitely needed to tie this one up a bit. And as you can see, and same with some of these, really matter. So set up your trellis wisely. In my personal opinion, these are nice along the fence, but if I were to have all the money in the world, I would build these for every variety because I can literally stick in a plant, a dragon fruit, into this setup and forget about it. I'm never worrying about the wind or them falling over. They're extremely stout.
Yeah, we have a video on how to make these trellises.
Oh yeah, we have a few videos. So
we'll put a link in the description.
We'll put a link. I really like it if you're into something permanent, but here's another point is maybe you live somewhere cold where you have to bring in your dragons like New York. Well, maybe make sure that you have a mobile dragon fruit trellis.
Yeah, some on wheels.
Yeah, so they make them, they're expensive. I've seen them a few $100s online. I haven't tried one myself, but I'm sure you could even go to Home Depot and kind of come up with your own design that's mobile. So really just think ahead about your trellis depending on the type of cold weather you have in your climate. All right, on to tip 6, and it's right here. It's the blanket. Hopefully you've seen our video on it from last season or the season before. And I've really enjoyed it. This is the same one that I've been using for 3 years now, 2 years. And with trellis design, as you can see, it's really easy to just plop it on and I could continue and put it over this whole plant by myself rather easily. But what I like about this blanket is now you can see I'm making a giant pile of different varieties. I have mango trees in here. I have really unique passion fruit, Adamoya hybrids, all sorts of things that I had to protect from the frost. And so what I did this week is I just wrapped this up like a burrito. And this blanket is the larger size, but it's protecting all of our plants, our trees. And what I did is I just kind of wrapped it up like this by myself. And luckily it wasn't too windy. I used some clips as well. And I just protected all of these unique plants and hybrids and seedlings just to keep some added protection.
You get a little more bang for your buck. You got like 30 plants in there.
Yep. So when you have this scale of plants, you can see I leave all of these trellises alone, but maybe I had like a really special plant I wanted to protect or something, I would go with using this blanket.
Plus the smaller ones are probably gonna be a little more sensitive.
Yep.
And less established.
So just doing this, you can see everything in there has been safe so far. No damage that I've seen, a lot of new growth. So really happy so far with using the blanket. All right, on to tip number 7. It actually sounds a little counterintuitive, but you can see by the health of this Asunta 2 from Elk Creek that it actually really worked. And what I did is I wet the soil before our frost. So I turned on our drip irrigation, and we had some rain too this week, which helped, but actually letting all of the pots get some nice moisture into them and having wet potting soil, that will actually be beneficial during a cold spell. So it will buy you a few degrees. I know that sounds weird. You don't want to water the plant material, but the soil. Having moist or wet soil will definitely help making your plants more cold tolerant. So try that. Unless you're using compost, you're going to need to cover it and you want to keep your soil dry, but that's also going to decrease your resistance to cold, if that makes sense. So again, we're back to that number one tip, is having the right soil, because you're able, at least we are able, you can see I watered all these dragons here, and actually the only frost damage I could find is, I found a little bit, you can see some right here, Scott. So look, this is a Sunta 2 seedling, which is a seedling off of the first plant I showed you. This is a daughter, and you can see that's frost damage here. So 6 days later, that's what the new growth happens to look like. But again, you can see every other plant. Oh, there's a little damage here too. See?
Yeah, I think your plants look healthier this year than last year.
They're the healthiest they've ever looked.
Yeah.
And again, I watered them really well before when we dipped into 29 degrees. And again, that's just for a short duration. We're not sitting here in our climate at 29 degrees all day. These plants are exposed to those temperatures for just a few hours.
Yeah.
So, luckily, until the sun rises. So again, moist soil, that's really gonna help make your plants more cold tolerant. Okay, tip number 8 is gonna be remove some fruit. And what I mean by that, some, is certain varieties here. In this case, Caslau, a Costa Ricensis variety, you can see what happens. These plants are a little more susceptible to cold in my experience, and they'll split like this Caslau. And so now these ants are enjoying this fruit. I could probably eat it. It's not gonna taste good.
Yeah,
so,
if you were on a desert island.
Oh yeah, if I was starving, I would eat this thing. But generally, I actually cut them earlier in the season before, so when they start to get rust, I'll show you one in a minute. I'll show you one that we're gonna cut. But what I mean by some is this Costa Ricensis DNA, it's gonna split and not gonna be a good fruit. Guatemalans, and especially Megalanthus hybrids like the Sairongs you saw earlier, are gonna taste good all season long. In fact, Israel calls them winter crops. So like Diego's Desert King seedling over here, you do not want to remove the fruit, because you're gonna have beautiful, delicious fruit that's gonna be ripe in March or April. So you can see this type of fruit, it's really healthy, much different appearance, and this one's gonna be a delicious fruit in about 2 more months.
Yeah, that was a long time on the vine, huh?
Yeah, some of them you just gotta wait. I think, what was it, 6 months, 8 months, or something like that last year it took before it was ripe, but it was absolutely delicious. One of my favorite Megalanthus hybrids. And you can see this plant's really healthy overall anyways.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
It's got nice new growth. It's got new branches even here after the frost. Look at that. I thought these would have burned off or died. Nope. This thing is just tolerating the cold. It's in a really happy spot here. Partial sun, I've learned. So again, certain fruit you want to remove. Ones like this, absolutely do not remove it, because you're going to have a delicious fruit in the spring. All right, tip number 9 is going to be winter pruning. And you can see here, we had to show you this fruit. This is one what I mean by cutting it off. This is San Ignacio. This fruit's not going to taste good no matter what. And you can see it looks like Rocky Balboa after a fight. I mean, look at that thing.
You could give your kids that in their
Adrian.
stocking when they're back for Christmas.
Yeah, I guess this could be like a lump of coal. You get this. So we prune those off, but you can see I'm actually spraying my cleaner after every cut. And that's because, remember, that just about all the plants in California, when they tested them, and something like 80%, 90% had cactus virus X. So it's a really good habit to always clean your pruning shear. You can see I use 90% rubbing alcohol in this hand sanitizer. Oh no, I actually just fill it with pure rubbing alcohol.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used the bottle,
Got
so
it.
I recycled it. So 90% rubbing alcohol, and what I mean is I cut from different variety. There's 2 varieties here, so I'll cut and only cut the same variety, and then I'll clean it before moving on to another variety. So that's a little, don't forget, a little FYI. And going back to the topic here, tip number 9 is pruning back during the winter. You can see that this is damaged here from the frost. This is Connie Meyer. And so what I like to do is I'll just cut off the tips a little bit. And in this case, I'll probably remove this whole branch, because there's a bit of rust, a bit of cold damage, and the plant's gonna respond, and that's okay. So in this case, I'm just gonna remove all of these. This is one of the few plants. I think I had 3 that got some frost damage, and this is one of them. So it shows you Connie Meyer is probably one of the most sensitive varieties in our collection of all the dragons. So I'll prune off that young growth that has the rust, any cactus rust you can see here. And in the case of this really long branch, I'm just gonna cut it here, just like Danny taught us, at a 45-degree angle, so that way the water won't hit here. and cause any rot. And you only want to prune when you're forecasted to have clear weather. Don't do this right before rain. You want this to heal. And in fact, you can actually use rubbing alcohol, which is one thing I'll use, or I prefer to use hydrogen peroxide, and I'll give it a little spray right on the wound, and that will really help. So remember, tip number 9, prune back your dragon fruit. And you don't want to prune them back too much. You just want to prune them back just enough to kind of clean up that damage. And if you have a bit of rust or some pathogens, clean that off. So you can see I can tend to go through these, and if they have really ugly looking branches, I prune them off. Okay, the final tip, tip number 10, is dealing with cactus rust. So there's actually different pathogens here. I probably see 2 on this plant, and I don't know how to say the names, but this is really common in our cold climate, especially if we get a lot of moisture that sits there. So this is one of Don Burnett's hybrid. This is Connie G and Queen Denarius' sister. This is seedling 1-12. And much like its mother, Connie Meyer, which we just saw get a little damage to the cold, this one doesn't have that frost damage. Luckily, it's more resilient than its mother plant, but it does get quite a bit of rust. In fact, you can see here, its seedling sister here is Connie G. Connie G has gotten quite a bit of rust here this season, but I'm just leaving the branches there because I want some fruit. So I don't care, it's not gonna be pretty. I know that in time, this is gonna heal, and in fact, it's starting to heal right there. So how do you treat this? Well, a lot of people use copper fungicide. You can also use neem oil to treat this. As you can see, I actually don't do much of anything, except for I have one new thing I'm gonna show you. I haven't tried it yet. I've just actually foliar sprayed my first plant, but I learned from a really cool farm that closed down, they swear by using, to deal with cactus rust, instead of using chemicals, they use this special type of seaweed powder. And it can't just be any type of seaweed. They told me I needed to find this one. It's called Norwegian sea kelp. I can't read that fancy name, but that's what they told me to find. That's the scientific name for the Norwegian seed kelp. And this is what they use as a foliar spray on their plants to treat rust. And they swear by it. So an organic farm that just sells to Whole Foods, they don't want their name disclosed, but they told me this tip last season. And so I found some, I bought it, and I just treated my first plant. And give us a like and a subscribe and follow our channel, and I'll let you know how this goes.
What do you dilute that to?
I just follow the directions, and it's really strong. So I just put a tiny, like a teaspoon or 2 into a spray bottle, and I did it at a small scale.
So that bag will last a long time.
Oh, it's gonna last forever.
Yeah.
And I actually add this as a top dressing to my fertilizer just to see, because you can see it's really high for bud and bloom. So you could actually use this a twofold. You could add this into your fertilizing regimen during the summer to enhance the bloom, because the last number is high. So I'm really excited. Again, it can't be any sea kelp. They swear it has to be this specific one, a Norwegian sea kelp. So there you go. There's our 10 tips to keep your dragon fruit plants happy and healthy. As you can see, it's been a journey, and we're in year 5 now, I think, Scott. And you can see our plants are healthier than ever. Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm going to talk about our organic treatment for cactus rust, and you're actually going to be able to fertilize your plants with this product while you treat the cactus rust. So this is the first plant, Queen Denarius, that I applied this on, and this is Norwegian sea kelp. And you want to make sure you get the right one that says Ascophyllum nodosum. There's tons of different types of sea kelp, and many are just algae, but this is the one that we learned from a grower named Wendy, and she grew plants for Whole Foods. And she swears by this product. They've been using it for years. In fact, they grow their plants under 50% shade cloth. But they said that this is their #1 go-to to treat cactus rust. So I gave it a shot, and as you see, we did have great results. So this has been about 3 weeks, and we did just get a foot of rain. So maybe 4 weeks now I've been treating it. And I left them alone during the rainstorm. You could see that this is what you want when they start to callus over or dry up, and you could just pop them off. So to me, this rust is not active, maybe slightly here, but really good results. Now, you also have nitrogen and potassium. So this will help, and along with all the micronutrients and minerals, and do a foliar spray. So we're gonna show you how to do that. But in fact, I've actually been treating all these plants up here, so let's see how they're doing. So this is Don Burnett's 1-3, and we called it Honesty. You can see it has a little bit of active rust still, but generally the plants are pretty healthy. Now you'll see that the actual cactus rust will look for a spot. It's airborne. It's an airborne fungus, and there's over 3,500 species of it. And they'll find a little weak point in the plant, especially on the younger growth. As you can see, they tend to not develop as much on the older growth. So they like to attack anything, or if a pest was in there. And again, this fungus will spread everywhere. It's airborne here. And so it's spread up the hill to these plants here, these different varieties. One of Leo Manuel's. This is Connie G. Actually got it pretty bad,
Yeah, that's a bad
you can
case.
see.
It's
And
like
it
a
didn't help.
venereal disease.
Oh yeah. Well, we also got a foot of rain, so that was unprecedented. And honestly, most of the time, believe it or not, I'll see a spine off another branch kind of damage the plant, and that's where the rust kind of penetrates first. And it will go into the cell and just suck out the nutrients. And it emits some proteins, and if the plant detects them, it will kill that cell, which will kill the rust. But dry days like today, that's really gonna help kind of blast this and kill it as well. But you can see, generally, they're doing much better than what they were. I mean, this is not pretty, but we had a really bad bout of rust here.
When it starts to change color, like get darker, you can kind of see it start.
Yeah, and these will still produce fruit. I mean, you just don't wanna spread it as much. So I tend to prune off some really bad ones just because we have so many plants. Like I would prune off this one. But you can see it's just really active, but it's actually really dying back. And you can see the residual of the Norwegian sea kelp foliar spray there. Even after the rain, it still stayed on there. But it spread really bad, and some varieties get it worse than others. Like it got on this Esmeralda really recently in cotton candy. But other varieties, they just tend to not really get much rust. Sugar Dragon will get it, but not quite as bad in my opinion. But we've been spraying these and I see a lot of good results. I mean, I still see some, and I'm gonna spray this for probably the next 4 to 5 days straight. And I like to spray in the evening. So let me go show you how I treat it. We got it down the hill, and I found a really bad example, or I guess a good example for this video, but we have a lot of cactus rust on this plant here. As you can see, it is bad. Probably the worst in the yard. Now, believe it or not, the first problem was actually due to this tree here, this palm tree. So it was really big and developed, and it was putting out shade for most of the day. So these plants in this area were shaded, and that really just added more problems because of the wet, cold weather that we have in the winter. The water will just sit on these branches, and that's where the cactus rust really thrives. Really cold, wet, humid environment. So what I'm gonna do in this case of this one is I put in 2 teaspoons. It's actually more than what's recommended. They recommend 1 teaspoon per gallon. So I've been using it a little bit stronger, and then I just really give it a good spray. Now, this is not the best time of day to do it because it's sunny. I recommend doing it in the evening. That's when I like to do it. But for today's episode, we're gonna spray it in the middle of the day. And as you can see, it goes nice and dark. And we're giving it nutrients, a little bit of nitrogen, and a lot of potassium.
Yeah, they can absorb nutrients through their skin, right?
Yes, so this is a foliar spray. I hope to someday buy a big backpack one if I can afford it, so that way I can do this much more efficiently and effectively. And you know, there's many ways to treat this. If you want to go conventional, you could use things we've shown in the past, like copper fungicide works about the same in my experience. Hydrogen peroxide, a lot of people use that, but I feel like that can actually
Or
maybe
cinnamon, right?
cinnamon, some people swear by cinnamon, and even neem oil will work. But man, I'm having such better results, I think. I mean, because cactus rust in Southern California this time of year is just inevitable, especially when you have as many plants as we do. And we have different varieties of cacti, so even up the hill we have a lot of succulents I collect, and I'm sure that some of them get rust, and again, it's airborne. It's not in the soil, it spreads by the air or insects. So in this case, I just make sure I spray as much as I can. You can go really heavy on it. And honestly, normally I'd probably prune off some of these branches, but this will be a really good experiment to see how well this treatment works.
Yeah, that's another solution, is just pruning if you have a lot to prune.
Yeah, and again, I'm fertilizing as I go. So this is just gonna benefit the plant. It's not gonna hurt it at all. And if anything, maybe the negative I could think of is I'm giving a lot of potassium in February, which could be bad because potassium induces buds. But as you can see, I don't see any buds because temperature and the daylight and the amount of sunlight are all factors for budding as well. So in my humble opinion, I think I'm actually just giving this plant a nice little foliar spray of vitamins is how I kind of imagine it. And inside kelp are some really amazing things. There's a lot of growth hormones, a lot of minerals, trace minerals, and nutrients and vitamins. So to me, it's just like giving your plant a multivitamin. So I spray all the plants with this product. And generally, I'm seeing a lot of new growth too, as you can see, in February, which is early. And that could also be due to the prolific amount of rainfall, like I said. And in really bad cases, honestly, I think I recommend to just prune some branches off. So, like something like this, see how rotten that is?
Yeah,
that's a weak point, so you just want to cut it. So I do something like that. I was always curious, you could see like an old bit of rust here. Let's see some that healed up. You can pop it off really easily. You could even use your fingernail. And see, just like that. But the new rust, you can pop it off as well. And it's very shallow. It's kind of on the top layer, if you see. But I wouldn't recommend doing this to heal your plants, as you can see. But that's active. It's going to be this orange color, and it's still going to be spreading spores and looking for any weak point in the plant to penetrate it and spread its DNA. So definitely recommend using this stuff. I've had nothing but success. We'll put a link in the description. I found it on Amazon, a very similar product. But the most key thing are two. You gotta have a soluble seaweed powder. It's gotta be water soluble. And then it has to be this variety, Ascophyllum nodosa. Hey, this is Paul, and I'm gonna show you how you can set fruit in a rainstorm. Believe it or not, this set fruit during our tropical depression last week, and we had over 3 inches of rain. And all I used was a silo cup. So let me show you how. So down here, I'm gonna repeat the experiment. And what I did is when the flower opened, right before I knew it was gonna open that night, I tossed a cup on it like this, as you can see. And I actually saw this from another dragon fruit grower online. And so I put this on the flower last night before it opened. And so imagine it raining right now. All I did last week in the tropical depression is I pulled it off. I used some stored pollen really quickly, and I pollinated it during the rainstorm. And then, drop the cup, I just placed the cup right back there for 24 hours. And that's it. And 100% of the flowers that I did this with, I did it on about 6 or 7, they all set fruit. And the ones that didn't, where I didn't use it and I just pollinated it, they aborted. So try out the silo cup method. It works really easily, especially if you're a grower in the tropical region. And I think it's gonna hopefully improve on your fruit set. So that's what I did, and that's what I experienced in the 3 inches of rain, and it worked really well. Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm gonna show you all the different types of potting soil, and we're gonna go from good to bad to horrible. So this is my personal growing mix. I do not expect people to use it, but it is pumice, a little bit of perlite number 4, peat moss or sunshine mix 4, coconut coir, humic acid, what else? Worm castings and sand. So, and I don't have exact ratios, it kind of just depends, but I use a lot of sand generally, but that's what's inside these pots. And look at our personal hybrids here. These Maria Fucsia seedling, really, really healthy. It's got growth already. Here's the Wallace Ranch Tribute. This is a seedling off of the Wallace Ranch hybrid, and everything's really happy, no stem rot. Now, if you don't want to do all that because of the expense, well, we have some really easy, cheap growing medias as well, we're being really successful with. And honestly, I think pure sand works absolutely great. So I top dress with Fox Farms now, so I only put Fox Farms on the top, and that sand has been awesome. This is 100% sand. I mean, it's got a little bit of pathogens here, but that's because we're getting so much shade here. But generally, you can see these plants are really happy and healthy, and I put them in here about 8 months ago now. So they're really doing well, they rooted well, they're spreading their roots. But if you can't handle the weight of sand, because this pot is extremely heavy, 25 gallons or 20 gallon pot here with full sand is, I think it was 220 pounds, something like that, of sand. But if you want something lightweight, you can see I'm using, this is just sunshine mix number 4, which I really like. and a bunch of pumice. So those 2 ingredients for this potting soil. We've done a video on that before. But look at that, we even got this Diego's Desert King to shoot new growth in the winter and root. So it was in our hothouse, so look at that. So these are 2 great, cheaper ways to grow your dragon fruit in my experience, and I highly recommend both of these. So pure sand, or the really easy, thanks to Stefan Marshall. He introduced us to the Sunshine Mix number 4, and pumice like I described, and it's way light, it's much lighter. So let's go down the hill. I'm going to show you the Vermistera sponsored pot, and what that one is let's see, it's 50% worm castings and 50% coconut core, and that one's all the way down here with some of our own personal hybrids, and that is here. Now the drawback with it is it did compress over time, as you can see. So it used to be higher up in this pot, so it's gone down about 1/3. So after what I think has been about 2 years now or so, maybe longer, and you can see it's gone down. So I'm gonna have to top dress it, and I'm gonna keep using the same materials just to see how it goes for long term. So again, this is 50% chunky coconut core, 50% worm castings, that's it. And the plants are healthy. They had a bit of rust here, but these are our own hybrids we're evaluating. This is a soon to 2 seedling, and generally you can see the plants are really happy. Now I used about 1/4 of this mixture in this pot, and then used the rest of my own mix, and that's working really well too. Now I do drill extra holes in these pots as well for added drainage. I think that's key. But generally you can see these plants are really happy and healthy. This is Gray Martin's opal, and it's acting like spring here already. So these growing medias, as you can see, these are all been replaced. They used to have fox farms, and now they're all been replaced. I have 0 fox farms in most of the yard. Let's go up the hill now, and I'll show you one that has some fox farms still, and let's see if there's a difference in the plant health. All right, so here is Caslau. Hopefully you saw our other video when we moved this plant from Danny's house. And this plant is too large. I tried to repot it this summer. I got a little bit of the fox farms out, and it's on year 2 for this pot. And generally I think that this plant looks pretty healthy. It does have a little bit of sun damage. I did get a little bit of rot in different parts of the plant. I had to cut off a branch here. Got a little rot over here. But generally I would say at year 2 with amended fox farms, this plant, oh, there's some rot, is generally pretty healthy. I mean, I think it's, personally, when there's compost in the soil, I feel like these plants are less sun tolerant and less cold tolerant, in my humble opinion. Or
what is the soil mix on this one?
Well, this one is amended fox farm. So I used back then, that was pumice, perlite, vermiculite, fox farms for the majority of it, and no sand back then. So a lot of coconut core though. I did use that, and worm casting. So generally this plant's pretty happy. You can see this is Maria Fusia that also had that old mixture, and I was able to get about 3/4 of it out of this pot, and I repotted it in the fall. And look at it, it's really healthy and happy too.
That one looks really healthy.
It's got some damage though, but it's putting out a bunch of buds, but you know, the buds that turn to branches. And I would say generally this plant it's a little bit better overall health-wise, and that's still has half fox farms in this pot and half of our new mix, which is the compost free. So I'm noticing generally that just my hypothesis, I guess, again, is that I feel that when there's a lot of compost in the soil, after about year 3 to year 4, these plants are just less tolerant of the extreme weather conditions. So with really healthy potting soil, with compost-free potting soil, I should say, I'm just seeing a better overall health of the plant. So that's my experience in this part of the yard. We actually have some that are about 4 years in fox farm, so let's go check those out and see what they look like now. Okay, so this is another part of the yard where these have not received any Grow Power Plus, but they've been in fox farm, amended fox farm potting soil for 3.5 years, and look at the overall health of the plant. So I did fertilize last season, and every year I fertilize, but generally, when the fox farm even amended, which has, I put in here pumice, well, mostly fox farms, pumice, perlite, vermiculite back then. And so by year 3.5 or year 3, you can see there's just a lot of damage. The plants didn't grow very well. The drainage is poor. And if you watched our video where we interviewed Gary Matsuoka, he taught us that all these ground up dead trees in your potting soil are bad in the long term because they're gonna make the soil anaerobic and it will actually kill the roots. And the drainage is poor as well. I think this one might be doing a little okay better because there's actually a hole in the side of the pot and there's added holes on the bottom, but still really slow growth. The color is much different than the other part of the yard. You can see they just get progressively worse. Here's another undatus, a lot of pathogens. It's really yellow, a totally different color. It's like lime green. And again, all these are in fox farms. Here's one that's one even older, and it climbed up this whole palm tree, as you can see. This is our little long-term experiment to just let it cruise up a palm tree. It's still never flowered. And you can see the plant health isn't that happy. I see fungus up there, I see pathogens, I see yellowing. And this one's even worse, look at this. So my hypothesis is that, again, this is a sunnier part of the yard. So when these plants are in compost, they're going to be less tolerant to cold and heat. They won't die. I mean, you can see how resilient these plants are. But man, this is not what you want. It's not healthy. This actually lost a lot of branches, and I'm going to move all these and repot them. You can see I have some control groups over here where these are our own hybrids, and they're just in our personal potting soil mix I talked about in the beginning. But look at the difference. Same amount of sunlight, different color, lots of new growth. So I really believe that having really healthy potting soil, compost-free potting soil, is the key to having really productive plants. So down here though, I will show you another interesting thing, is that dragon fruit plants that get a lot of shade, they do quite well with the Fox Farm potting soil or compost. You can see I have one over here that I've neglected. This whole section of the yard, sorry Scott, watch your head. But we grow a lot of plants here. And this one over here is actually really healthy. And it's in the same potting soil, but look at how little sun it gets. And it's never produced, it's climbing up this cypress tree. And it does have a lot of leaf litter from our bamboo. And the soil's really wet, but man, without a lot of sun, this plant looks pretty darn good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks healthy.
But this much shade, you're never gonna get fruit from a plant. It won't be very productive. So this thing's growing fine, but again, the key is, I think here, why this plant is healthy, it's not so much the soil, it's more about the lack of sun.
And it has a little windbreak here. Maybe
yeah, it is get a lot of protection.
A little more warmth, maybe.
Yeah, so we even have some more over here, want to see? And these ones have been a long-term experiment where I had them in Fox Farm still, which I will remove all of that this season and finish the job here. But these plants over here have always gotten about 40% sunlight, so not very much. And I just wanted to see what would happen if we neglect them and don't give them enough sunlight. And look at these, look at how little they've grown in 3.5 years. Same potting soil, same amount of water, same fertilizer, but look at how there's a lack of growth, the color's different, and they definitely need more sunlight, as you can see. So I even put one here just to grow along this vine, and I won't do that again. So I've really learned from this kind of control group, as you can see. So believe it or not, look at this plant. 3.5 years it's been in here. So that's kind of my experience of different potting soil medias for now. Let's show you one more. I have one more down here that you won't believe. So let's go. It's one of my oldest plants. Okay, now this one is probably our saddest story. This plant is over 4 years old, believe it or not. It's one of our first plants, and I just stuck it in the ground here next to this rock. So I believe our native soil, with a combination, the soil gets really dense. It's very heavy in DG, but I believe the combination of the heavy soil with a lot of shade and a cold rock, you can see it even rotted here, has led to horrible growth. I mean, look, this thing is 4 years old. It's literally like the 4th dragon fruit plant that I bought. Some no idea I got, I think it's a Home Depot or something, like fake Haley's Comet. So as you can see, I think potting soil matters. I think growing in pots can be helpful for dragon fruit depending on your native soil unless you amend it. And I think sunshine is key. So personally, I really am on this improved potting soil mission because I really am noticing growth on using these compost-free potting soils and better long-term solutions. Hey, this is Paul, and thanks for checking out our preview on Albino Ocamponus. You can see here, it's a stunning fruit weighing in at 61/100ths of a pound. And visually, it's absolutely gorgeous. And we'll also do a second season review on Gray Panama, which is a rare Ocamponus. It's weighing in at just under a pound. And then a standard, this one is a No ID Del Riego, one of my favorite Guatemalan varieties. So let's go ahead and get started here with what everybody's curious about is this version of Ocamponus. Now it's actually a white fleshed inside, as you can see. So I'm really excited to try it, and it definitely looks really ripe. You can see it's got a thin skin. It's actually got a nice flesh to seed ratio. And then I even see some like little yellow spots in it. Look at that. That is a very unique trait. And then you can see how it compares to a traditional looking Ocamponus. You can see the fiery red skin. It's absolutely gorgeous. This one turns yellow before it turns red. And then inside, you can see it's a much different red flesh. But you can see both of them are quite ripe, and they're not overripe because I don't see any degradation of the flesh here. It all looks pretty consistent, maybe a little there. Versus this one, stunning. Now, these traditionally are not my favorite to sample, so let me ease into this with something familiar, this Gray Panama. Sweetness, earthiness, and that familiar, I define it as a sweet beet Ocamponus vibe, but this one's not too bad. And then the seeds, I detect an earthiness in them. Slightly mushy texture. This one may be a little overripe, but not bad. See its sugar content. Definitely not in my top varieties to grow or eat. I mean, it's edible, it's enjoyable. It's probably better than the majority of fruit that you could buy in the store. A lot of those white flesh especially are picked too soon. But definitely not what I want to eat as a first choice to grow. But not bad. It's just okay. I'd give it like a C or a 6 out of 10. Something like that. That's a D actually. There you go, 15 7/10. It'll get higher. Some of these will bricks into the 20s. I've had Ogrillo bricks close to 20. But it generally tastes about the same there. All right, let's see how this one compares. Okay, it's a bit more dense than Gray Panama. A little mushy. Not as flavorful, but this is the first season fruit on kind of a small plant. It's definitely going to probably be sweeter next season with more plant mass, but not bad at all. Let's see how the sugar content of this sample here. 14. 13 9/10. I'm sure it'd get a little sweeter for sure. But definitely not a typical Ocamponus flavor. Sweetness. Not much earthiness. Probably better than, I would definitely say this is better than any store-bought Undatus I've eaten. This one has more acidity, but this one's rather mild. The seeds are not earthy either. Pretty good. I find also the little yellow specks kind of interesting. I'm eating them right there. I'm definitely going to keep it around. I really like how it looks. There's a few versions of these. There's like a Albino La Catrina, I believe. It's got longer spines. I think I have the shorter spine one. And they say that this one maybe tastes not as good from what I've read online. But hey, I'll keep it around. They're definitely some of the better Ocamponus that I've had so far. All right, now I need to kind of compare it to something that I consider a premium top tier variety is any Guatemalan. And man, just off the top of my head, American Beauty, G1, G2, G3, Shayna, Condor, so many more. But these just tend to taste better. I like the texture more. I like the sweetness and acidity that's balanced. The seeds are more enjoyable, although these ones are rather mild. So there you go. Red flesh, white fleshed Ocamponus, which is pretty rare, and Guatemalan or Guatemalensis variety. So 3 beautiful fruit. Aesthetically, these ones are probably some of the most beautiful dragon fruit that you can see. But again, these tend to not taste as good as many other varieties. But stunning, stunning plants. All right, give us a like and a subscribe. Thanks for watching. Take care.